to me way.
Welcome to the Shanty Show, the show about sea shanties. Today we're going to take a look at the Mystic Sea Museum and the Mystic Sea Music Festival down in Mystic, Connecticut. The Mystic Seaport Sea Music Festival has been held annually in June since 1979 at the Mystic Seaport Museum in Mystic, Connecticut, and it is the largest sea music festival in the United States. The Mystic Seaport is America's leading maritime museum. Founded in 1929, the museum is home to 4 National Historic Landmark vessels, including the Charles W. Morgan, the last wooden whale ship in the world. Our guests today are Geoff Kaufman, who was the director of the music festival for the last 25 years, and Mr. Marc Bernier, who has also been working at the festival since the early 90s. I'm joined today by Stephen Reed.
Hey, James. Good to see you again. You know, we've had the pleasure of performing at Mystic a couple times, and it's a magical place if you like sea shanties.
Absolutely. For anyone just joining us or joining the community, it's something that you really must check out if you get the chance to.
Well, I think without any further ado, why don't we get to the chatting with Geoff?
Let's do it.
Tell me, Mr. Stevedore, how do you stow the cargo? Way, hey, hey, sing, sunny door. Tell me, Mr. Stevedore, how do you stow your cargo? Bound down Trinidad to look for sunny door. Boogie free, my bully boys, a Burton in the archway. Way, hey, hey, sing, sunny door. Boogie free, my bully boys, a Burton in the archway. Bound down Trinidad to look for sunny door. Oh, Trinidad, you pretty little harbor. Way, hey, hey, sing, sunny door. Trinidad, oh, Trinidad, you pretty little harbor. Bound down Trinidad to look for sunny door. So boogie free, my bully boys, a Burton in the archway. Way, hey, hey, sing, sunny door. Boogie free, my bully boys, a Burton in the archway. Bound down Trinidad to look for sunny door. What will you do with sunny door if ever you should find her? Way, hey, hey, sing, sunny door. Roll her in the grass, my boys, and all among the clover. Bound down Trinidad to look for sunny door. So boogie free, my bully boys, a Burton in the archway. Way, hey, hey, sing, sunny door. Boogie free, my bully boys, a Burton in the archway. Bound down Trinidad to look for sunny door. So tell me, Mr. Barber, how do you shave your customers? Way, hey, hey, sing, sunny door. I grab 'em by the nose and shave 'em on the chinsio. Bound down Trinidad to look for sunny door. So tell me, Mr. Stevedore, how do you stow your cargo? Way, hey, hey, sing, sunny door. Tell me, Mr. Stevedore, how do you stow your cargo? Bound down Trinidad to look for sunny door. So hoister high, hoister dry, rock and roll me over. Way, hey, hey, sing, sunny door. The ship's all right, the crew's all tight, roll me in the clover. Bound down Trinidad to look for sunny door. So tell me, Mr. Stevedore, how do you stow your cargo? Way, hey, hey, sing, sunny door. Tell me, Mr. Stevedore, how do you stow your cargo? Bound down Trinidad to look for sunny door. Down Trinidad to look for sunny door.
Excellent.
Well, thank you so much, Geoff, for joining us. Why don't we start with tell us a little bit about that shanty?
All right. Well, it's in a collection from James Madison Carpenter, who was an American who went over to England to collect in the 1920s. And he collected songs all over England, but for our particular interest, from a couple of sailors in Wales. And he also went to Scotland and recorded some fascinating oyster dredging songs that are done pulling an oyster dredge. But Bob Walser, who was the foreman of the shanty program at Mystic Seaport when I first got there, and was running the Mystic Seaport festival when I got there, has gone on to dig into that collection, and that's become his life's work, to listen to these wax recordings recorded in the 1920s and parse the words, which are pretty hard to hear on a wax cylinder very often. And he's managed to dig out the lyrics of a bunch of these incredible songs. And that one in particular, I'm fascinated by, because it's not really about working at sea. It's about working on shore, stowing your cargo. A burden in the archway is one of the phrases we've begun to understand is that can mean crosswise in the archway. And booge free in that song is actually for bilge free. So if you're stowing a cargo of casks, you need to support them in such a way they don't touch each other to push each other out of round so that whatever's in them leaks, particularly if it's oil or good libidinous liquors, let's say. So these details in songs like that are one of the things that have fascinated me from the beginning about this music, are the clues to the actual activity that was involved in a particular song.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I love that observation that, you know, that these aren't just songs of working on boats. It was all the stuff that took place around the boats, including, you know, on the docks, sometimes in the railway. You know, we sing donkey riding, which is actually about a small loading engine called a donkey. And it's just cool because wherever this work was being done, there were songs to make it go a little bit easier.
Well, am I correct in presuming that you might be on to Gib Schreffler?
Indeed, we are.
Yes,
indeed.
He's going to be participating in this, right?
Well, we're hoping so. We haven't heard back from him yet. So, but I definitely his new book, that Boxing the Compass, is a really excellent book.
Right
Oh,
here.
there it is, right there.
And he actually has just he has a whole series of papers that he's put out on academia. And the most recent is his sort of initial response to someone asking him about the TikTok craze. And fascinating, you know, he goes through a lot of his normal argument about the fact that these songs, when you really look at them, are being traced to Black roots of one kind of labor or another, much of it on shore, not at sea.
Right.
And he in particular has dug into the cotton stowing shanties, which are among my favorites. And so he's just become, to me, one of the great scholars of this form of music, and you can learn an awful lot from looking into his work.
Absolutely, and I like in that Boxing the Compass, he's really examining how do we know what we know about the shanties, right? It's not just what is it that we know, but where did these sources first appear?
Exactly.
Yeah, he's done some really excellent work. I've been enjoying his work since he was Ranzo, the YouTube Chanteyman, a few years ago.
And then
It's also
you know, we brought him to Mystic Seaport a couple of times to present in the symposium. And actually one of the things, he has a video of himself leading a shanty at the windlass on the Charles W. Morgan. And one of his papers is about that tool being a significant thing to hold on to actually be able to demonstrate how these songs might have been done, even though you're not hauling the weight of the ship up to an anchor.
Right. You mentioned earlier about the you know, the Black roots of a lot of these songs and types of music, and one of my favorite recollections of being down at the Mystic Seaport and the Shanty Festival there was getting to meet the Northern Neck Chanteymen, who are, you know, for those that don't know, a group who, you know, used to have a singing tradition as they went out fishing and to haul up the nets, and they did this amazing demonstration of how they would kind of pull the nets up. And one of the great regrets I have in life is at one point they'd offered to teach us some of the verses that they sang once they got out of earshot of their wives on shore, and we never managed to make it happen. And it just, it's killing me. I would have loved to have heard what they were up to.
Well, I'll tell you what, those fellows are very interesting, and I'm actually trying to make contact with them again. Actually, I think you were interested in trying to track them down.
We'd love
So
to get him on the show.
I'm working on that. But it turns out that the Johnson girls, as persuasive as they are, I think, got those fellows to go off in a corner and sing some of those verses to them.
Amazing.
Not that they're singing them on stage, but anyway.
Well, we are definitely having the Johnson girls on a future episode. They've agreed to it. We're just finding a time, so we'll have to ask them about that.
Many years ago, I mean, we can talk more about my involvement at the Seaport, but I took over running the Sea Music Festival just a couple of years into my time there. And in about 1980, let's see, about 1988, maybe 1990, we brought the boat from Beaufort, North Carolina. We brought the Menhaden Chanteyman, was what they called themselves. And that was fascinating because they were even older than the Northern Neck Chanteymen. They were definitely in their 80s, and maybe one of them was 90. And John, who was their leader, sat in the middle. They sat on chairs on the stage in a semicircle so they could see each other. And as opposed to the Northern Neck men who bring a net and actually reach down and pull it up and sing, won't you help me to raise them? These guys mimed that action sitting in their chairs, reaching forth. And then they did the jabbering back and forth. It was just incredible to watch. And they sang, going back to Weldon, which I'll sing at the end of this.
That's a great one. One of the things that really struck me with the Northern Neck Chanteymen was somebody asked them what their influences were. Where did they get their repertoire from? And I was really impressed when they said, well, we're influenced by, blues and jazz and gospel.
Yeah.
And they didn't make reference to any collection of sea shanties. And the way that I've sort of approached sea shanties is from things I heard as a child growing up from my dad, or from recordings, such as the Clancy Brothers, and then thinking, I need to dig deeper into this. And, finally, it got to the Stan Hugel shanties from the Seven Seas. And, I guess what I'm trying to say is I have this preconceived notion that this is really like a tradition that's being handed down. But it was really interesting to hear from their perspective that they were coming up with these call and answer work songs, sort of outside of that body of songs that have been notated and passed down. And I think that really illustrates the improvisatory nature of these kinds of songs in the first place.
Well, that, and that they were drawing on music that they knew, but applying it to the rhythms of the work that they had to do. And that was extremely difficult work. You have images of them leaning back, almost flat like this, holding onto the net. And it was incredibly strenuous. And they were just pulling out the music that they could apply to it for that moment. So I think that's a fascinating insight indeed.
So what drew you into this wild world of sea shanties and naval museums and seaports?
Well, I was living in New York City. I'd sort of bailed out of a graduate program in English literature, and I was casting about doing messenger service and stuff. And I met some fellows in First and Queens who were singing Irish music, first of all, but then one of them had Dorflinger's book of shanties, and he actually knew William Dorflinger. And we began to sing that repertoire. And we had become a quartet with two tenors and two bass baritones. And we really were falling in love with the music just by the nature of it being so singable and so approachable. And at the time, South Street Seaport was really beginning to be a focus. I mean, back in about 1976, in the bicentennial, there was a new focus on traditions of sail, and mystics, and South Street Seaport became a focus of that. And so we realized that, well, if we go down to the Seaport, South Street Seaport, and sing a little bit, maybe we'll get some attention. So we went down and stood in front of the Ambrose Lightship on a nice May Saturday, and opened up singing, and 100 people gathered around. Then we shut up and they all dispersed, and then we started singing again 20 minutes later, and people gathered around, and we realized, oh, well, maybe we can actually do this. So we actually then we recorded one of those funny things that goes around on a turntable, and I brought it we recorded it in 1979, and I brought it to Mystic Seaport because I had a friend going to Brown at the time. So I dropped it off, and we were invited to the 1980 first Sea Music Festival at Mystic Seaport.
Wow.
And so that quartet went to Mystic, and in those days at Mystic, we stayed on board the Joseph Conrad. All of the performers did. And they had not gotten to the more modern lighting that they've gotten to more recently. And so it was a foggy night, and we ended up, I was just wandering around Mystic Seaport looking at these ships in the fog, and it was absolutely captivating. And I also struck up a friendship with Bob Walter, who ran that particular festival. And then he ran the next one, I think, and then he moved on. And he started to invite me to come down to the Seaport. I was living in the Catskills by that time, back up in the Catskills where I grew up, which is a long way from the sea. And I had not had any contact with this music prior to my experience in New York with my quartet Stout as in Guinness.
Nice.
And the size of two of the guys in the group. Anyway, I began to go down to Mystic Seaport and sing on various weekends that actually Bob Walzer wanted to get away and go to other gatherings. And so by 4 years later, I was in need of a job, and I contacted the Seaport, and they hired me that summer, and I stayed on for 35 years.
Wow.
Wow. And you've just recently retired, you were saying. Okay.
Well, the timing was great for me, not great for A.J. Wright, to whom I passed the baton, because I was there, was able to celebrate the 40th annual festival, which was the 25th that I had actually organized. And it was a glorious final event for me. And then, of course, COVID hit as of the next, by February and March of the following year. And the 41st festival was canceled, and we're still waiting to be able to get another one together. So, so I retired actually a couple of weeks after that festival. However, I've continued to be there as a consultant, both to the Shanty program when they want to, any advice from me, and also with the Williams Mystic program, which is a program of collegiate studies, semester of maritime studies, that includes asking the students to participate in different activities that the Seaport offers, so that they can learn to work on iron, or they can learn to be a ship carver, they can get their hands into it, or they can learn to sing shanties. And so I've been privileged to be one of the people that's been able to teach shanties to college students through the Williams Mystic program.
Wow.
That's really wonderful. And for anyone who's new to the Shanty community, whenever COVID ends, if you get the chance to, you really must check out the Mystic Sea Music Festival. There's nothing else really like that in the world. And one thing that, Jeff, we were talking about a little bit just before we got started, is that this is really the only place you can see the work being done as it would have been done in the 1800s.
Right. Yeah, it's, we have 3 different vessels that are large enough to actually demonstrate this work on. And beginning with probably the simplest of those, where we can only demonstrate one particular kind of shanty, the L.A. Dunton, which is a fishing schooner from the 1920s. We can actually drop a 600-pound anchor with its chain, and it only goes down, 12 feet. But we can use the windlass to get that back up. And it's a real work. And it requires learning to sing these songs in the proper method and rhythm and speed.
which works. And then on the Joseph Conrad and the Charles W. Morgan, we can demonstrate these songs being used at the halyards, at the capstan, and on the windlass, but that is a little more difficult because we can't put a real load on that windlass. However, when we're hoisting sail on either of those vessels, it's a real thing. And one of the great delights is, well, I don't remember. Did we get you guys on the halyard when we had you down there?
We did, I think so, yeah. And we did the capstan as well.
And the experience for performers who have been doing this on stage, when they first get there and do that, is totally unique. It's you don't know what that's like until you actually do it.
Yeah.
In fact, I remember in 1980 when I first was there, and I was, I thought we were great stuff. We were singing this stuff on stage in New York City, and people were paying attention, and they loved it, and they sang along. And so I get on the Joseph Conrad, and I leap to the halyard to do a halyard, and what did I sing? Blood Red Roses, and I sang the verse, and I sang the chorus and hauled in the right place, and I sang the verse, and I sang the chorus in the right place, and within about the second chorus, I realized I better stop singing the verse. If I'm going to put that much work into the actual task, then the crew has to sing the chorus. And that's the way it's built. It is call and response.
Yes.
That is the nature of this music. So it was like that. I got it. And it's so much fun to watch other people have that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I can relate to that as well. And I think in our shows, I still do tend to do the answer parts as well. But yeah, you'd be running out of breath pretty quickly if you're trying to do that in real life.
Yeah. When you're not doing the work, it's hard not to sing the whole thing. But anyway.
So I have a sailing background. Used to sail on tall ships, and one of our bandmates, Tim, was in literally the same boat for a period of time. But what's really kind of interesting is we stay connected to the sail training world, and particularly among younger sailors, this is something that they want. They want to be able to have these songs and sing them on board to, sometimes to coordinate the work, but also just makes it a little bit more fun. So it's great that that's still kind of thriving and alive in a sector of sailing in some way, shape, or form.
I just think context is incredibly important. And that's one of the things that I'm worried about with TikTok, that number one, it misassigns the word shanty to all kinds of sailor songs. And Wellerman is not exactly a shanty. It's really a ballad. It's kind of telling, waiting for the now I could adapt it for work at the windlass. It would work okay, but that I don't think was its intent. Right. But I like to give context to anything I sing, not just shanties, not only the maritime, but everything else I sing. I tend to do a bunch of storytelling just to let people know where it comes from and why I want to sing it. So I'm worried about that elements in TikTok, that so much of the stuff is possibly getting out there. Although we've got some really good people like David Kaufman getting on TikTok and singing good material. And hopefully, actually, I guess I better go on TikTok to see what he's saying about it. But if I were to go on and sing something, I would try to preface it with a comment about where it's coming from and why it's significant.
And that's a really interesting point, because I guess with the nature of TikTok, there isn't really that opportunity to write a message about that or the preamble, or so that is I hadn't thought of that, but that is kind of a troubling. It raises sort of some troubling potential issues.
But it can also be, a gateway into this world, right? And I know, Jeff, we were talking a little bit before that, on the one hand with shanties, there is this rich tradition of shipboard knowledge and geography and cultural blends. And so academically, it's just massively fascinating. But from a social singing perspective, it's a whole other different beast, right? And what I'm enjoying particularly about TikTok is just the encouragement that it's given people to sing. and shanties are a particularly accessible art form in that regard. Whether or not they then go, deep down the rabbit hole of where these songs came from is another matter.
Yeah, no, absolutely true. And that's what attracted me, and I think you fellows as well, to this music in the first place. It's so singable. And I think that Gibbs, term for that is tuneful. But I would also point to the idea that, for instance, for a number of years, for a lot of years, I was a member of the quartet Forebitter out of Mystic Seaport. And we went over to France, like 15 years running, to major festivals. And they brought us back because we were singing the songs with a blues influence. We were singing the harmonies, and we were bringing that element to this music that really excited them. And I think that that's a lot of where this interest in general for shanties is coming from, that they're born out of these traditions of music that has such great melodies and such great energy. And even though many of them, we were talking about the minor and major versions of Maui, so many of these songs are in the minor key, and yet they deliver incredible energy. So that was what worked for these people on board ship doing the work.
Well, Geoff, thank you very much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. And can you tell us a little bit more about the Mystic website and how people can donate money if they want to help support this festival?
Well, people can go to mysticseaport.org, and they can navigate to the virtual Shanty Blast that happened today from 1 to 3, and they can donate directly. One of the nice things is that donating money through that portal will be money that goes to Sea Music at Mystic Seaport. So that would be a great thing to do. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful event, wonderful couple of hours. I think it showed actually 500 people registered for that Shanty Blast. So it shows the enthusiasm that exists around that program at Mystic Seaport and the festival that we, were able to run for 40 years and hope will come back. So just, a wonderful thing for me to have been a part of for all those years, and to be able to share with other people.
Well, thank you so much for your contributions to this genre of music over the years.
And such a great pleasure to be a part of this.
Up next, our conversation with Marc Bernier. Hi, Marc.
How's everybody doing?
Great. How are you?
It's really nice to see you. Oh, was Geoff just a hit and run?
Yeah, we just wrapped up with him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he stole all the good stories.
I see what I can do. Yeah.
We've been talking just about how'd you get into shanties? What is it about them?
Well, getting into shanty is not something that I really consciously did. I grew up in Clinton, Connecticut, on the coast of Long Island Sound, where I grew up, I'm 10 miles away from a bar called the Griswold Inn in Essex, Connecticut. And Cliff Haslam has been singing sea shanties at the Griswold Inn every Monday night since like 1974 or 1976.
Wow.
I mean, yeah, he's been there we're going on 50 years now, So it's always been there, and when I was a teenager, going out to bars in New Haven and Hartford, you could be at one bar where a band was playing Black Sabbath and Deep Purple, and the bar next door Don Sinetti was playing at. And I mean, both bars were equally occupied. It was just here. I've always sang sea shanties as long as I've been hanging out socially.
That's cool. I have to say, the first few times I heard sea shanties, I didn't really distinguish them from the other songs on, say, the Clancy Brothers CD that I was listening to. So I don't know if that was a similar experience for you. Was that part of like a broader folk music?
Yes, I didn't distinguish at the time. Like I'm saying, I'm talking about Cliff Haslam and Don Sinetti, who you actually know as men who sing sea shanties.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, they sing folk songs. they're singing the Clancy brother, the Clancy brother, they're not going into what the Wolf Tones and the Dubliners were doing, but they're right. It was pop Irish music,
Right.
and it was highly popular here when I was a teenager. So I had been singing this, I was going on 40. I was like 35 years old when I was offered a job at Mystic Seaport. But because they knew me, I had, those guys had heard me singing shanties for 10, 15 years when they asked, hey, you want to work at Mystic Seaport? Yeah, sure.
Can you tell us a little bit about what your role at the Seaport sort of has entailed?
I worked at the Seaport. I was involved at the Seaport for a few decades. I came on as a volunteer at the Sea Music Festival. And after volunteering for a couple of years, this was in the mid to late 80s. After volunteering for a couple of years, a touring group had established at Mystic Seaport, Forebitter, and they were spending increasingly more time on the road. So there was incentive to increase the shanty staff there. And that's when Don Sinetti and I came on staff at Mystic Seaport. They knew who we were, but they were looking to increase. So there was a touring personality, and the likes of Don and I and a couple of people, certainly during the busy season, were doing the job. And I mean, it wasn't like two clubs. I mean, we all sang together, but my timing was perfect that I happened to live in a window of time where they needed somebody to do this. Previously, it had been 4 or 5 guys working there, and they doubled that staff in the early 90s,
I love that there's a shanty staff. That's just so fantastic to me.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, at the time, you guys know who Forebitter is, right? They haven't sang publicly in a long time, but that was a great band, and I was, so I came on staff while they were at the height of their activity, and I got to work with them. What a great experience.
That's wonderful. And how long have you been with Mystic now?
I came on as paid staff in like 92.
Okay.
And I worked pretty much full time until 2010, 2011. At the time, I tried my luck at working as a full-time musician, and I decided for myself that I really enjoyed having a day job and gigging out occasionally a lot more. So, but yeah, but I've maintained my relationship with the museum. Even though I left in like 2010, 2011, I'm instrumentally part of the Sea Music Festival staff. And there's a couple other special events throughout the year that I'm part of the music presentation for those. I got 4 events that I do, and that I'm going on like 30 years now that I've been doing at the festival.
Wow,
that's
at
amazing.
Seaport.
So over that time, you've no doubt seen a whack of different ways to approach this music, and I'm just sort of curious to know, kind of what are the ways of singing or presenting this music that you personally just have sort of say, yeah, like I like that style, that's cool, that's how it how I like to see it done, or do it yourself.
I like a presentation with conviction. Get behind what you're doing. There's some wonderful people out there that are just like blasting out the ballads and stuff that I consider myself to be a storyteller. You know, the songs that I sing, I'm telling a story, you know? And if you're going to go down that road, get behind the story, you know? Get behind it and really sell it, you know? And I enjoy people who are doing that, you know? You know, oh, yeah. Did you guys listen to this afternoon's to the thing?
I tuned in. I really liked your
Did you
song that
hear
you sang
Nicole
there.
Singer?
Yes,
Oh,
that was
oh,
wonderful.
just
Yeah.
you know, just you can hear everything she's telling you in that
Mhm.
story. You know, I can't say that I want people with big voices like me. Everybody doesn't have a big voice like me, you know, and don't try to sing like that. You know, just get behind what you got, you know, and you know.
Well, I gotta say, in terms of stories, the song you sang, the second last song of the Shanty Blast, about being a shantyman that essentially has no sailing experience, really resonated with me because I'm an absolute greenhorn when it comes to sailing. But I
Is
love the music and the history and the culture surrounding it so much. So
it's oh yeah, that song is. When I first heard it, guy that wrote that, Micah Patterson from Bristol, England. I was doing a festival he was at, and he sang that, and I was like,
You know, we did manage to get James out sailing once, and I got to say those musicians' genes are strong. Like, you were very good at standing around watching work being done.
yeah, I was supervising. You know, it was just
"That's right. Everybody's got a job." Yep.
So what do you make of you know, we have to chat about it, right? That the whole TikTok thing and people getting into shanties that way.
Well, I think it's cool. I really think it's cool. You know, and it's funny because I'm old and I'm grouchy about some things, but I apparently am more tolerant of some things. You know, because I remember being 19, 20 years old when like the Pogues were becoming hot, and I had absolutely no tolerance for these punk rockers singing sea shanties, and I just found it to be appalling when I was 18, 20 years old. And you know, and I get what I love the Pogues today, you
Mhm.
know, 40 years later. I'm you know, but what you were getting at is just, damn it, if people are singing sea shanties, you know, they could grow up like me. I, you know, which is good in some, but you know,
Is that an advertisement or a warning?
it's this is cool. Like I said, when I was 18, I was going to bars and seeing people like Don Sinetti and Cliff Haslam, and you know, so they're doing this TikTok thing. I, there's nothing annoys me more than somebody at a song session reading
Mm.
lyrics off a device. And you know, why do they always sing a 14 verse ballad? But you know, if that's what they're doing,
Yeah.
you know, I'm sure I annoyed people when I was 20 years old. I'm pretty sure I annoyed people when I was 20 years old. You know, I no, I think this TikTok thing is cool. You know, Brian May did a guitar thing of Weller Man the other day.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
awesome.
it was just like,
Wow.
yeah, Brian May.
I think that's we share that same opinion. I think anything that gets more people singing is just fine by us.
You know, and I'm not as opinionated today as I was 40 years ago about whether they can use electric guitars or not. You know, you know.
Now, Mark, I have to ask. I know we've chatted in the past, and you've got some French Canadian roots, but you're a proud American as well. And I was just curious, because I know Gibbs Schreffler in particular is very adamant about the spelling of shanties should be spelled the American way, which is Chantey. is there any sort of annoyance that the alternate sort of British spelling, the Shanties, is the one that was sort of adopted for TikTok? Is that an important detail to you whatsoever, or is that just?
I didn't even notice that.
Oh,
Didn't
okay.
even notice that. I've been looking at the word spelled different ways for so many. I don't even pay attention to the way it's spelled. That means,
Fair enough.
yeah. And in all fairness, the guy that started this craze was from Edinburgh, right?
Yeah, it's Scottish. That's right.
You know, he would spell it that.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I didn't even notice that it was spelled that way. Yeah.
In defense of the American argument for the spelling, one of the stories I've heard of the etymology for the word shanty is it would be from the French word chantier, which is a workplace. It's like a work site. So from that point of view, the spelling would be more similar to the American one.
That's the explanation I give when asked. When asked, yeah. It's likely it comes from this phrase.
Mm-hmm.
The work leader on a dock in Mobile, leading the men that were jacking down the cotton,
Mm-hmm.
would have yelled, "Shanty, how about?"
Yeah, that's true as well.
Yep.
Well, chanter, the word to sing as well, of course, is very
To
very
sing.
connected.
Hey, Mark, you mentioned earlier that your tastes musically have evolved, and your level of tolerance for stuff that might be slightly outside the box has evolved as well. I'm curious to know how your taste in like songs that you sing, and songs that you find sort of attractive to be in your current repertoire. Like, has that changed over time? Has that selection process evolved? And what makes a shanty Mark would like today?
Yeah, I've matured a lot since I started doing this. Kind of fortunately for the personality that I developed, in my early shanty development, I was looking for shock value. I invested energy in looking for things that other people wouldn't do. And I now have a big bag of that. But it took me a long time to realize that's not all I was capable of. And I don't gig a lot, as far as singing sea shanties. When you're looking for a shanty singer at a library, there are numbers that you dial in Connecticut and Rhode Island before you dial Marc Bernier. But the further my chops have developed, and the more I've matured intellectually, I've realized I'm a good storyteller, and I really look for songs that tell an interesting story now, because I think I've got pretty good chops at delivering that way. Was one of your guys the last time you were in Mystic commented during the concert, that he invests a significant amount of energy in not trying to sing the shanties too long. And I remember standing at the back of the shed and going, I take the exact opposite approach. I really look for more of the story to add, I don't mind singing Paddy Lay Back for 5 minutes. If I can sing Paddy Lay Back for 4.5, 5 minutes, why not do it?
Yeah.
Because it's certainly, you never get an opportunity to do it while you're working.
Right.
Unless you're actually hauling up an anchor, which is an unpleasant job. But I actually did that one.
Now, Mark, you were mentioning that you've been doing some work with fife and drums. Is it arranging music for fife and drums? You were saying?
Arranging music for fife and drum.
Yeah.
We have a tradition here in southeastern New England, not dissimilar from like you see a gathering of people singing sea shanties. Our town band tradition in this part of the country are these fife and drum corps. The fifers and drummers were responsible for communicating signals on the battlefield, and that was throughout the 18th and early 19th century. The fife and drum corps that I play today, which is, it's kind of funny in this world, which has historically been one of the cutting edge, pushing the envelope on what you can do within the tradition. This is who I play with today. And I, interestingly, am the person in that corps that keeps pulling back on how far we go. I'm kind of like at the same place in the shanty tradition as I am in the fife and drum tradition, you know.
Well, it's interesting, Mark, you mentioned the idea that sometimes the arrangements are getting a little too modern, or the choice of notes or chords is perhaps a little too outside of what the original context would have been. And I feel that that's something that we've run into with Pressgang Mutiny over the years, for sure. When we're arranging our songs, sometimes people want to add these different things, and it's a fine line. It's kind of tricky because you don't want to sort of stifle people's creativity. And also, you know, you got to be aware that this was a style of music that was largely improvised and wasn't really very refined in many ways. But at the same time, it's a fine line where, you know, how do you decide when something is too far? And, you know,
James is our jazz chord police. He's the guy who's always watching out for who's singing a 7.
yeah, I'm the old man in the group there from that point of view. But yeah, it's an interesting thing to consider and to talk about, I think.
It is, you know, and you know, over a couple of beers, I can sit on either side of this argument quite comfortably.
Right.
I half of this population, I'm talking 100, 120 years ago, half of this population thought linearly and didn't think harmonically. However, during the same period of time, you know, the height of what we are doing in the shanty world, you know, during the 1870s, 1880s, 1890s, John Philip Sousa was writing. Scott Joplin was writing. Okay, people understood this chord structure. And you have to realize that sailors were, in fact, the most cosmopolitan people in the world. They traveled from city to city, and they didn't travel from Lizard Lick, North Carolina to Dog Breath, South Carolina. You know, they were traveling to Berlin, to Paris, to London, to New York, to Boston, to, you know, that's where they live their lives. So to think they weren't encountering this really sophisticated music that we really haven't evolved very far from since, you know, harmonically, both arguments exist. You know, so there were some people singing harmonies, you know, and they understood, you know. Like I said, John Philip Sousa was writing music. Scott Joplin. I'm doing a series on my Facebook thing this month of all cakewalk pieces. You know, the arrangement that I push on that I publish on Saturdays. All the arrangements were written around 1900 by African American composers. You know, and they're really, really sophisticated pieces of harmonic music. You know.
Yeah, I remember that. It reminds me of being in university, and there was this. I remember hearing about there was this idea that there would be this new American sort of classical music, and all the intellectuals were expecting that it would be coming out of the European classical tradition, and right under their noses there was ragtime that was being born in New Orleans, and it was sort of ignored and not really. It took, I think, about 2-3 decades for people to really understand the cultural impact of ragtime and how that then subsequently influenced other things like jazz, and that changed everything, right?
You know, they're drawing on African harmonies there. You know, they're using seconds and sevens and nines that you know that Western music wasn't using. You know,
that's right.
It feels like a good time for us to maybe sing a song, James. What do you think?
Yeah, Mark, would you like to lead us in a song?
Oh, sure. What kind of song?
Maybe a sea shanty.
It's advertised in Boston, New York, and Buffalo. 100 hardy whaler men are needed for to go. And it's cheer up, me lively lads, in spite of stormy weather. Cheer up, me lively lads, we'll all get drunk together. They'll send you to New Bedford, it's there a time to dwell. The thieves are thicker there than on the other side of hell. And it's cheer up, me lively lads, in spite of stormy weather. Cheer up, me lively lads, we'll all get drunk together. They'll put you on a staunch old bark so able, trim, and stout. They'll tell you that you'll have her full before you're 6 months out. And it's cheer up, me lively lads, in spite of stormy weather. Cheer up, me lively lads, we'll all get drunk together. Well, now we're out at sea, me boys, and the winds begin to blow. Half the watch is sick on deck, the other half below. And it's cheer up, me lively lads, in spite of stormy weather. Cheer up, me lively lads, we'll all get drunk together. You try to pass the galley with one eye on your mate. You smell your supper cooking, and now up comes all you ate. And it's cheer up, me lively lads, in spite of stormy weather. Cheer up, me lively lads, we'll all get drunk together. Now comes the bloody compass. It grieves us all quite sore. They say there's 2 and 30 points. You'll swear there's 64. And it's cheer up, me lively lads, in spite of stormy weather. Cheer up, me lively lads, we'll all get drunk together. Now comes the running rigging, which you have got to know. If you don't learn it in a week, you'll lose your watch below. And it's cheer up, me lively lads, in spite of stormy weather. Cheer up, me lively lads, we'll all get drunk together. They'll send you to the masthead there to weather out a gale. They'll promise you $10 if first you raise a whale. And it's cheer up, me lively lads, in spite of stormy weather. Cheer up, me lively lads, we'll all get drunk together. They promised you a bonus if first the whale you spy. Of course you'll get a bonus, of course, when pigs can fly. And it's cheer up, me lively lads, in spite of stormy weather. Cheer up, me lively lads, we'll all get drunk together. Well, now we're back from sea, me boys. It's 4 years we've been whaling. We left the glass with all our friends, and damn this blubber whaling. And it's cheer up, me lively lads, in spite of stormy weather. Cheer up, me lively lads, we'll all get drunk together.
Hey, well done.
Cheers.
I don't think I've heard that before.
I've never heard that one either.
It's out of Harlow.
Ah.
The Sailor.
What I liked about that too, Mark, is I think Stefan and I were demonstrating the authentic way that sailors would have picked up songs on the fly and messed up the lyrics a few times, and then by about the third or fourth time. Yeah. I'll be singing that all for the rest of the night now, though. Well, a few years ago, I was on tour in the Yukon with a band that I play with, and I had this book called "Don't Shoot the Albatross," which was all about sailors' superstitions. And I picked it up at a store called A Nautical Mind in Toronto. And unfortunately, at some point, this book accidentally got thrown out by one of my bandmates who has remained nameless. Anyhow, I went back to A Nautical Mind to try to find the book, only to find that it's out of print. However, I did find Songs of the Sailor, which is compiled and edited by Glenn Garasso, but transcribed by Marc Bernier. So Mark, could you tell us a little bit more about your involvement with this project?
It came as a winter project. We decided to do an educational recording at the Seaport. And as we were talking through the project, and each one of the, I don't know if there's 8 or 9 of us on the staff at this point, everybody on the staff sings a song on the recording. As part of the planning process, somebody goes, well, why don't we publish a companion book with the recording? And okay, and then I went, okay, if we're going to do this, there's no need in printing bad copies of these, reprinting bad copies of these songs. Why don't we transcribe what each performer sings on the CD? And it turns out that I was the only person on staff that could read or write. So I ended up, we went into the studio, and we recorded like a 12, 13 song CD. And then I sat down with, actually, I learned how to use computer music writing software. On that very project, I transcribed the entire recording as sung. So the rhythmic fluctuations that people are doing, I actually notated. There's like 2 or 3 songs in that book that's the first time they were ever in print. Yeah, I didn't realize how many of us don't read and write. Do you read and write?
Do you know what? I
don't.
do.
James does.
Yeah, I do, but I tend not to like learning that way. I much prefer learning by ear. And I think that's a big part of the folk music process
same
too.
here. I would say 90% of my repertoire has been really developed socially, and not even really trying to learn it, just being there when it's, and, oh yeah, let me play that, yeah.
Well, I've certainly heard that the best way to learn is when you're comfortable and you're not trying to absorb information. That's the best way. Well, for example, for learning a language.
Yeah.
And music, of course, I think is the international language. They say math is the international language, but I've never seen people from diverse parts of the world sit down and do math together. I'm sure they do it somewhere, but I feel that music is the true international language.
That's what the everyone was doing while they were singing shanties. As a whole other crew of folks down below just working on complex formulas.
Probably somewhere someone's doing that, but I'd much rather be here.
Well, that's the thing, and there's a misconception, the whole thing, the way ships work. While they were singing shanties, there was nobody down below. I mean, you set sails at the beginning of your trip.
Right.
You don't take in sail until you can see the dock. So this is the first 3 hours of the trip that this is going on. This isn't going on day in, day out.
Right.
Right. The minute you think about it mechanically, it's like,
yeah, I never thought
this
of
is
that.
like a small slice of their culture.
Yeah. Set sail, catch the trades, and go.
Right. I mean,
So
it might be 20, 30 days before you take in sail. I mean, you might hit a storm in a week, but it could be 20, 30 days before you take in sail.
So I never really thought of that at all. So from that perspective, you would have heard a lot more sort of forebitters and folksal songs.
It would have been watch on, watch off, and you would have been as silent as possible to not wake up the guy in his bunk down below. Okay. There was the dog watch. There was a couple hours in the afternoon when the evening meal was served that, some guys were writing letters and there were folksal songs. And, as you were getting close to port, there would be more dancing and getting in shape to go dance with the girls and whatnot. But the majority of that voyage, it was a very, very quiet boat.
I never thought of that. That's fascinating. Well, Mark, would you like to lead us out of this episode with another shanty?
'Twas cold and wintry morning one December, when all of me money it was spent. So now where the hell it went, I can't remember. Down to the shipping office I went. Oh, Paddy lay back. Take up your slack. Take a turn around the capstan, heave a pole. Oh, about ship station, boys, be handy. We're bound for Valparaiso around the Horn. That day there was a great demand for sailors. For the colonies and for Frisco and for France. I signed on a whaling bark, the Morgan. And I got paralytically drunk on my advance. Well, Paddy lay back. Take up your slack. Take a turn around the capstan, heave a pole. How about ship station, boys, be handy. We're bound for Valparaiso around the Horn. They called us out one night to reef the topsails. Belaying pins were flying round the deck. And the cook was stealing brandy from the captain. Christ, I know we'll never make it in this wreck. Paddy lay back. Take up your slack. Take a turn around the capstan, heave a pole. How about ship station, boys, be handy. We're bound for Valparaiso around the Horn. Now, the mate and second mate, they came from Boston. And the captain came from Bangor down in Maine. The boatswain was a limey named Marooney. Not a man jack among them had a brain. Paddy lay back. Take up your slack. Take a turn around the capstan heave a pawl. Oh, about ship station, boys, be handy. We're bound for Valparaiso around the Horn. Say a prayer while we go round the Cape, boys. 'Cause when we do, you know we'll all be dead. Now won't you stand by and listen to the mate, boys? 'Cause the captain, he's crazy in his head. Paddy lay back. Take up your slack. Take a turn around the capstan heave a pawl. Oh, about ship station, boys, be handy. We're bound for Valparaiso around the Horn, and it was on the quarter deck where first I saw them. An ugly bunch I never did see before. For the captain of ship, a Shanghai crew of drunkards. And it made me poor old heart for sick and sore. Paddy lay back. Take up your slack. Take a turn around the capstan heave a pawl. Oh, about ship station, boys, be handy. We're bound for Valparaiso around the Horn. It was then I made me mind up that I'd leave her. I'd get a job and I'd live me life ashore. So I jumped overboard and swam ashore, boys. And at the German club I slept on a floor. Paddy lay back. Take up your slack. Take a turn around the capstan heave a pawl. Heave a ball. About ship station, boys, be handy. We're bound for Valparaiso around the Horn.
Great song.
Well, thank you very much, Mark.
Hey, nice talking to you guys.
So
Mark,
good
once
talking to you,
again,
Mark.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Well, that was a ton of fun, James. Any chance to kind of hang out with Jeff and Mark and hear their stories and get reminded of how amazing the Sea Music Festival at Mystic really is. That really brought back some memories for me, and some anticipation of when we get to do this again in person.
Oh, absolutely. I can't wait.
Okay, so just a couple more things to wrap up for the day. Every episode, we like to highlight a amazing sail training vessel that is doing the good work to bring new people into the traditions of tall ship sailing and, of course, sea shanties. So let's have a listen and take a look at today's tall ship. For today's tall ship, we thought it would be fun to feature one of the ships that Jeff mentioned earlier, specifically the Charles W. Morgan, which, alongside the L.A. Dunton, the Sabino, and MSC Barry, make up the Mystic Seaport's fleet. So the Morgan, as she's called, is an American whaling ship, and she's the world's oldest surviving, as in non-wrecked, merchant vessel. In fact, in terms of surviving American vessels from that era, only the USS Constitution is older, which is pretty remarkable. The Morgan was built in 1841 and has a length on deck of just shy of 107 feet, 165 feet when she's rigged, and a roughly 28-foot beam. Her hull is wooden, primarily oak and pine. She is a fully rigged ship, so she's a three-master. She's got squares on all three masts for main and mizzen. She has served as a museum ship since the 1940s and was designated a National Historic Landmark in 1966. So a heck of a lot going on there. And if you want to find out more, then you should definitely get down to the Mystic Seaport. And in the meantime, you can visit their website at mysticseaport.org.
I'm very, very excited about one of our upcoming guests here. I mean, I've been excited about all of the guests. This is really an incredible excuse to talk to some really interesting musicians. I'm very much looking forward to interviewing Alex McMurray from the Valparaiso Men's Chorus, and their first album was actually called Guano and Nitrates, which is a pretty excellent title.
So lots of great guests coming up. So we'll see you, I guess, see you again next time.
Yeah,
Thanks,
what
everyone.
shall we do with Drunken Sailor? What shall we do with Drunken Sailor? What shall we do with Drunken Sailor? Every morning. Hey, we'll put him in the scuppers with the hose pipe on him. Put him in the scuppers with the hose pipe on him. Put him in the scuppers with the hose pipe on him. Burn out every morning. Way up she rises, way up she rises, way with a rusty razor.